Well, good morning. We're going to call our P&L committee to order. Just remind board members, any other speakers to please speak into the microphone so that the recorder will pick up the sound for our minutes. This is critical that we have the right minutes transcribed. We welcome everybody that's here in attendance, and we thank you for your interest in the work of the State Board of Education. Is there any media present that's not been recognized? Okay, welcome. And you are from the state? Well, welcome. We appreciate your attendance. Is there any objection to approving the minutes of May 6, 2025 as presented? Hearing none, the minutes are approved by unanimous consent. Is there any objection to approving the agenda for June 3rd, 2025 today as presented? All right, hearing none, the agenda is approved by unanimous consent. We do not have anybody signed up for public comment, and there are no items for approval today, but we do have one item for information, and we welcome Mika Childs, who is the director in the Office of Education Choice and Family Engagement. I think we're going to hear another chapter of charter schools, correct? Yes, sir. Okay, well, welcome.
Impact on the distribution of charter schools across the state. I also highlight the fact that we have 11 virtual charter schools operating in South Carolina. Also point out, this is also information on our page, the number of students. We're sitting at about 61,000 charter school students in South Carolina. These figures include children who are in schools that are locally authorized, as well as those that are attending schools that are authorized by a statewide authorizer. And so when we refer to statewide authorizers, we're pulling together this public charter school district, as well as those that are affiliated with institutions of higher education. Often that's kind of the breakdown, but I try to make sure I'm clear in distinguishing what we are referring to, or which institutions we're referring to. You'll see that there is a good bit of growth occurring among the institutions of higher education authorizers, but that's part of just the nature of how authorizers over time build out their portfolio and then reach a level of stability. Our institutions of higher education authorizers are newer. One is a little bit older, and so you'll see that the number of schools they're bringing on board is slowing down, even though they continue to see growth as their existing schools grow or expand or replicate. But the newer authorizers are the ones that, as makes sense, are bringing on more schools. This application window, here I'm showing you the results. There are a few things that are still pending, but what I want to emphasize is kind of the outcomes for each authorizer. You'll see in that kind of darker blue, and I can see the way it's rendering is a little harder to distinguish, that when an application comes before an authorizer, they can approve it. They can approve it conditionally. They can deny the application, and the applicant also has the option of withdrawing the application before a decision is made. And so those are mainly the four outcomes that you'll see. Interestingly, you'll see that Voorhees University on the far right, they denied all four of the applications they considered. And so currently, that means they are not slated to open a new school in the 26-27 school year. The 2025 application window is determining which new schools would open in 26-27. That's the timeline. And I'll walk through the timeline for the application window here shortly. And so what we see coming out of the 30-some-odd applications that were submitted, Limestone Charter Association received 17. They approved 2. They conditionally approved 9. And then others were withdrawn. You'll see that the Public Charter School District, SCPCSD, they had some withdrawal and then they denied others. But those are the outcomes of the application window. As much as we are desirous of new schools, new charter schools opening, we want to see growth. We also need to defer to the authorizers in making sure it's high-quality growth. And the way they do that is through this evaluation process as they're vetting the schools. Yes? It varies in the specific process, but ultimately they take each application through a review process. Most of the authorizers bring on external stakeholders to help them, so they kind of stand up a team, and they'll look at things like, do they think they'll hit the enrollment numbers? Do they think they'll be able to reach sustainability with their budget? Are they supportive of the instructional practices? And so they have to take them through a rigorous vetting process. And if the board is interested, I can work with the authorizers to provide you more details. One difference, Voorhees University, they partner with NACSA, and that's the National Charter School Authorizers Association. They partner with NACSA since it was their first year going through this process, and I think that was a wise approach. So that in their review process, they work with a national organization to work alongside them in determining whether or not the application was high quality. And so there's a range that aligns with the areas of performance that the state emphasizes, anticipating academic performance, anticipating governance, and anticipating financial performance. Okay? The app. Yes, the next application season, decisions made in this does not dictate what will happen in future application seasons. Some will reapply to the same authorizer, because in the denial letter, they do get feedback from the authorizer. Some that are denied can appeal through the appellate process that statute allows. If they have reason to believe that the application process had flaws. But fortunately, the majority of those will, and you'll see that's partly why some withdrew. As they began going through the evaluation process, they realized we need to strengthen our application. Some that have withdrawn, we'll anticipate that they'll reapply, some to the same authorizer, some will go to a different authorizer. We've had schools submit prospective schools submit applications so letters of intent and applications to more than one authorizer. So there are options before them. Opening a school is not an easy process, and it should not be. We don't want to make it arbitrarily difficult, but it is a huge responsibility that they're taking on. They're doing it in service to their community, in service to the students, but there's that balance of the process needs to be rigorous so we can ensure high quality, while we're looking for growth, because we want parents and students to have as many options as possible. But to your question, those that are denied, yes, they may reapply. They may apply to the same authorizer. And some of them begin working with authorizers to help, or others to strengthen their application, because there's a field of expert consultants that they can turn to and things they can do to strengthen their application, whether they go back to the same authorizer or try working with a different authorizer.
So is that application the same for all authorizers? Is that dictated by the State Department, or is that dictated by the authorizer?
State law requires that the State Department of Education come up with a template of things that are required that all applications have, no matter who the authorizer is.
Okay.
However, authorizers may add to the application things that are specific to their to their district or their instructional environment. And so there is some variation, but there are also core components that are determined by state law. That's spelled out in statute. It's in the regulation that the State Board of Education holds in place, and it's in the policies promulgated or policies that we offer as guidance as the State Department of Education. We offer some training on the application process, but most of the training, I would say, is done through the authorizer. So it's not a passive function that the authorizer holds. They're already looking ahead to the 26 application window. There are information sessions that are held so that they're not holding the prospective charter school's hand in the process, because you want them, of course, to be strong enough to stand on their own. But they also know it's not an easy process, and they've learned there are things they can do to help increase the number of high-quality applications they receive. Okay?
And Mika,
the
with
charters-
that.
Oh, I'm
Excuse me,
sorry.
Go ahead.
With the charter schools choosing their authorizer, it's not like by region, they just decide on one? Is there a
Well, that
process for
varies.
them?
I'm sorry, I started speaking before you were
Is there a
done.
process for them to decide which authorizer to go to?
So an interested entity that wants to form a charter school, they form a planning committee, and that committee will decide, they'll think through the options that are available to them. If they want to apply to a local operator, a local authorizer, where they plan to establish the school has to be in the geographic boundaries of the school district. And so if they want to be in, we're here in Lexington 2 geographically, well, the school would have to be in Lexington 2's boundaries. However, if they apply to a statewide authorizer, they just have to be within the boundaries of the state. The boundaries of the district formed by a statewide authorizer coincide with the geographic boundaries of the state.
Mika, as authorizers are approved, is there any follow-up after that? Is there any accountability or oversight for the authorizer?
All local school districts are eligible to be authorizers. They do not have to apply or register or do anything. So that's true of the local school districts, whether they have a charter school now or not. The South Carolina Public Charter School District is established in statute, and so there's not a registration process at all for it. The registration component applies only to the authorizers that are affiliated with an institution of higher education. Current law, they register with the State Department of Education. Our current practice is to take them through what we are calling a ready to authorize process, to do what we can to help them be ready to function as an authorizer and as an LEA. But our current law has them register with the agency. When they complete our registration process, we list them. The accountability the state holds is not as they function as an authorizer, it's primarily in our oversight function and interacting with them as an LEA. That's where currently there is authority between the agency and authorizers. They are LEAs, and so they receive state report cards. And there's financial oversight in their practices, okay? I will tell you that there is a bill pending that would change the registration process into an application process and would create more of an evaluation role that would bring more accountability from the agency in the actual performance of all the statewide authorizers, but the sort of accountability we could offer to the state public charter school district is different than with the institutions of education, higher education, because they will not face the prospect of revoking their application. But that's in pending legislation, and that bill has not passed yet. Okay.
But whether or not they serve, your example, within one school district, that determines then where their student population can also come from.
You're talking about the charter schools?
Yeah, whether or not they,
Correct. If they are
authorized
locally authorized, then they are limited to draw from students
within
within
that district.
their district.
But if they're not, then they can draw from the whole,
Right, and so they face greater limitations if they're locally authorized than if they're statewide authorized.
that was my understanding, okay.
All right, so looking at the outcomes of the 2025 application window, let's see, we're looking at about 10 new schools that could form. So looking ahead to 26, 27, some of them will open as planned. Some of them, for various reasons, will face delays and may open in a later school year, and some of them may not successfully open. The other thing I'd add is with those that are authorized by Limestone, and I know elephant in the room, there are other things going on with LCA, and I will discuss those later. But just looking at the evaluation, the application window, LCA approved 2 schools and conditionally approved 9. They're making determinations about those conditional approvals later this month. And I'll think through the best way to update you, because I want to make sure I'm not coming before you, what do they say, we're not my welcome. But we'll update you on the outcomes of that. So it could end up that all 9 move forward, or that might not be the case. We're waiting for them to make their final decisions. We'll move into kind of where we're looking in terms of the total number of charter schools. Currently, there are no transfers that have been provided to the State Department of Education, and so we're looking solely at the new schools at this point. Later this month, we'll get the final updates on whether or not any of these schools that are currently open, out of the 104 that are currently open, whether any of those are facing closure. So those updates will come before you here soon. But coming out of the 2025 application window, we've looking ahead to 2026, 27, there can be 10 new schools opening, bumping us up to 114 new schools. So if you look at where we were coming into the application window, back in November, that's when the letters of intent were due. There were 86 letters of intent. Now, some schools submitted letters to more than one authorizer. We received a total of 33 applications, but you'll see kind of how the pipeline works. 12 projected approved, but looking ahead to 26, 27, we might be looking at around maybe 10 new schools that will open. In terms of charter school growth, I'm sorry that's not rendering exactly correctly. I'll figure out how to make that better. But if you look at when we started authorizing charter schools in South Carolina, we're coming up on, 30 years now? That's been an option for children. Of course, we started with a very low number, and we've grown, and we expect that there will be continual growth. You can see kind of bumps in process. For the 26 window, would follow the same as usual. But if you look at 25, information sessions were occurring in the spring, so this time last year, for the applications that were evaluated. And if you jump to that green part, we just finished the application evaluation. The schools that were approved are moving into what the authorizers refer to as a ready-to-open process. And it'll culminate in 26, 27 with actually enrolling students. So ready to open would include getting everything set, but then also actually recruiting students. I'll abbreviate things. You'll hear more from us on school performance. Mainly, I want you to know that we, under our state accountability system, hold charter schools face accountability and the fact that they are options. And so they, on some level, face kind of the ultimate accountability in the sense that parents choose to enroll the children in those schools. They also receive state report cards, which bring with them levels of accountability. Charter schools If they fail to perform over periods of time, they face automatic closure. That's not true for other schools. And so we monitor that. That's a point I want you to see. We also look at other areas within student performance, such as college or career readiness, third grade reading scores, fourth and eighth grade math scores. These are things internally that we focus on. Authorizers also, and I do want to highlight that, authorizers have academic performance metrics that they have that are unique for each of the authorizers that go beyond just the state accountability system and are actually quite rigorous and bring with them professional development and other things to hopefully strengthen schools that need it and support those that are doing well. Main thing I wanted to show you with looking, again, initiating conversation, looking at the funding of authorizers. This is looking solely at the statewide authorizers. It won't be the first time I speak to you about this. Authorizers are funded because they are allowed to keep 2% of the funds that flow from the state to the schools that they authorize. So they receive state and federal dollars. These are statewide authorizers. You'll see that their per pupil spending, there's variation across the authorizers. And there's also you'll see that they tend to fall a little bit lower than traditional schools. That's the main point to draw there. And that's not to say that being lower is better or worse in this case, but it's just an awareness in terms of an evaluation prospect or the return on investment. And this comes from insight data from the State Department of Education. You'll see, if you look at a percentage of how they're using their funds, if you look at operations, there's a little bit of difference between how the statewide authorizers are using their funds relative to traditional school districts or the state average. You'll see a bit more emphasis on leadership in terms of percent funding, and this comes from fiscal year 23. There will be some variation depending on whether there's high growth or they're bringing in new principals. And so this is just a snapshot in time looking at one fiscal year. Over time, I will bring more information to you so you'll get a clearer sense of the funding side. So main point I want to draw to is we're, again, laying that foundation. We'll be looking at academic performance and financial, but at a high level based on what information the state collects, leaning heavily on insight data. All right, for policy updates, and I'm sorry to go through the other parts quickly. Of course, we had an interruption. I'll come back to this another time. I'll spend the remainder of my time, depending on questions, providing a policy update on a major announcement that has taken place. As you all are, I think, mostly aware, in May, Limestone University announced that it is closing. That has impact for the Limestone Charter Association. LCA is an authorizer that registered with an institution of higher education. Under our state law, if the institution of higher education goes away, and honestly, I'm not sure how deeply contemplated that was. We were focused on some other aspects of allowing multiple authorizers to come forward. But here we face an institution of higher education closing. That raises the question of, well, what does that mean for the authorizer? As we went through decision-making processes where we are, and the State Department of Education has been in communication with state leadership, with Limestone Charter Association, as well as with authorizers and other stakeholders. Rather than trying to make a quick decision and move to try to finish things by the end of the 24-25 school year, what the state is doing is using the 25-26 school year as a transition period. There will be transition for Limestone Charter Association as an authorizer and as an LEA. and a transition period for the schools it sponsors. But we're using the 25-26 school year because we want to make sure that we are serving the children that are affected well. What will happen is going to affect children and the students in the schools, the teachers, the communities they serve, and we want to make sure we're moving very cautiously, but we do need to comply with law. The South Carolina Department of Education is working with LCA and what we're calling a closure protocol for the 25-26 school year. Limestone Charter Association will fully operate as an LEA, and so it will continue to receive state funds, administer any grants it oversees. It will function as a school district throughout the school year. But of course, as we turn towards the spring of 2026, there are things they will begin winding down. So we are working with them on both ensuring that LEA functions continue while also planning for what that winding down needs to look like. This is particularly important because in charter school law, the LEAs, the authorizers, are responsible for ensuring that special needs services are provided for every child that requires them in that school district. And so it's important that we as an agency are speaking with clarity and coordinating with with Limestone Charter Association in using the 25-26 school year, but making sure those LEA functions continue, okay? The same financial oversight measures are in place. So funds continue to flow because children are still being educated, but that transition does need to occur. And so there will be a high-level activity that ramps up in January on through the spring. What we are expecting is that there are some things that won't fully close out June 30, 2026, because there are things that have to close out at the federal level. But in terms of their functions, fully operational for the 26-27 school year as an LEA, as well as an authorizer. They still have to ensure academic performance of their charter schools, governance is occurring, proper governance is occurring, and that they are providing their level of financial oversight for the schools they sponsor. So at a high level, LCA is going through a closure protocol. We are coordinating with them on that and in close communication, close conversation with them, okay?
May I ask a question?
Yes.
So why were they allowed to approve 2 and then conditionally 9 if they're going through this closing out process?
And I forget the exact date, but the applications were already in process at the time the announcement occurred. So that's one factor. The other is they are still an authorizer. And so we have been, as I said, in close communication with them. In fact, we worked with LCA in issuing our communication directly to their schools. And I'll describe some of what was in that communication here shortly. But within that communication, we emphasized the fact that beginning July 1 of 2025, so here in a few weeks, LCA will not be receiving any more transfers or approving any new schools. So just having to balance out the reality that they are still operating as an authorizer, but we are winding down those functions. Those charter schools that apply, those applicants, they didn't know Limestone was going to close. And so, again, operating with all urgency to comply with the law, but recognizing that it's prudent for the children that are affected to create a smooth transition. And in terms of the future for those new schools, we'll talk to that. I'll speak to that in just a moment. Okay?
I understand you correctly that the association of charter schools at Limestone is going to continue as an entity and provide oversight for those charter schools.
for the 25-26 school year. At the end of the 25-26 school year, the Limestone Charter Association will cease to operate as an authorizer.
And the goal is to reassign those to another.
Yes, and that gets to the second part. So two things will need to occur. Limestone Charter Association is going through a closure protocol, and we are in close communication with them on that. The schools that are sponsored by Limestone need to transfer to a new authorizer. Now, when a school transfers, it's not a snap decision. That charter school has a board. That board has to identify a new authorizer, and essentially they will need to work with Limestone to agree to end their contract and work with the receiving authorizer to agree to ultimately a new contract. And so there are really three boards involved. The board of that charter school, it has to go through its decision-making process. Limestone Charter Association needs to go through its decision-making process to release each of those schools. The receiving authorizer has to also go through their decision-making process to agree to receive that new school. So what we've communicated is they need the charter schools need to engage the decision-making process and make their final decisions between July 1 of 2025 and December 15th of 2025. As they make their final decisions, they need to communicate with Limestone so they can go through the transfer process with Limestone, complete the transfer process with the receiving authorizer, and then Limestone will engage us and tell us, okay, the Department of Education, where is each school going? Because there are administrative functions that we need to complete from January through the end of the school year to get these schools transferred over to their new authorizer. So there are lots of moving parts. High level, using the 25-26 school year as a transfer or as a transition period. LCA is going through a closure protocol. The schools are using 25-26 to conduct their transfer process, but they need to begin their transitions so that they have made their decisions by December.
You know, I'm going to ask a question. Help me to, oh, I'm sorry.
I don't know if I decide who goes first
Okay,
or
okay.
I think the chair decides.
Okay, we'll let ladies go
Okay,
first. Dr.
okay, I'm
Johnson.
sorry. Help me to understand this authorizer. Does it have its own board?
Yes.
Okay.
And so, and I want to be careful about creating hypothetical scenarios, but, you know, the authorizer will decide if they want to receive the, it's not, we as a state don't compel any one of the existing authorizers. The schools have, and I have that listed in terms of their options. These schools can look at the local districts in which they are geographically located as an option. They could look at any one of the other statewide authorizers, Voorhees, Public Charter School District, Erskine.
I ask because I guess when you go back to that slide that had the finances on it, I live in Gaffney, so I'm seeing and hearing about what's going on at Limestone every day. Financially, they were not held accountable before, and I'm wondering who's being held accountable now? Does the LCA have a separate board, not the Limestone University board, but a separate board?
Correct, they do.
that
And
we
that's,
say
to me, there are a
yes.
couple questions that come forward, to present opportunities to provide more details to you all. But yes, there's the Limestone University, and it's facing the situations that led to its closure. They have a board. LCA has a separate board that is connected to Limestone University, but And one of the things we emphasize in the communication we've sent out to schools, the closure protocol LCA is going through is not a reflection on LCA's financial standing or the performance of the schools or even its performance as a district. It's just statutorily required because the institution is going away. So in terms of holding an institution of higher education accountable for financial practices, that's not in my portfolio, and so I have to figure out who you have to talk to about that. But with LCA, they are a school district, and the agency has been providing proper oversight for it as an LEA, as we do any other school district.
It's a whole separate entity.
I have to be careful in responding to that question. They,
Okay.
Thank you, Mika. We're going to let you answer
Yes.
Dr. Hanley's question, and then we'll wrap it up, okay? Okay,
I do have a question, Chair.
okay, go ahead.
What is your opinion about why none of the major schools, state-supported schools in South Carolina choose to be an authorizer of a charter school?
well, one, we are leaning into providing more information to encourage more to come forward, because we do think that would really just be a wonderful opportunity for the state that we are not currently optimizing. But of course, we can't compel that. It's something they would choose. We think more will. I'd also say it is not a light responsibility to take on. Because you won't just be an authorizer in our state, the way the law is structured. You become an LEA and bear with that the responsibilities that all school districts hold. And so there's that balance. So it's a tremendous opportunity to have a positive impact on education of children across the state. But it does bring with it the responsibility of being an LEA. And so those that are aware that the option exists are weighing that opportunity and responsibility.
I would think it would be an excellent asset in terms of proving the competency of the education program at some of these schools to take on one of those charters and show what they can do with it.
And I'm honestly sharing your sentiment, which is why we are thinking through ways to inform and engage more institutions of higher education to see what we can do to encourage more of them to come forward. But of course, that's not anything that we compel.
Last question. Bottom line, are charter schools doing better on average in producing students that at a higher ratio on exit exams or achievement exams?
I'd say that there is significant variation across the schools because some of them are actually going after and specifically serving lower performing children. And so if you were just looking at averages, honestly, I'd say that we would want to look at that a little bit differently than just averages. I'd say across the board, I wouldn't just look at test scores. I'd look at things like behavior, attendance, civic engagement, those things that are beyond just test scores. I say on average they are doing well, but we have lots of area where we need to improve, and that's something we're digging into more to figure out where charter schools are excellent and find ways to demonstrate that and expand on it, provide more similar options. And honestly, the ones that are not doing well, supporting authorizers in their function to help those schools improve or choose not to renew their charters. That's where I land. I'm not trying to avoid the question, just I've looked at the data that there is significant variation, and often when you dig into it, it's because the charter school is a place that the traditional school district is choosing to send more challenging kids. And so by design, those schools are going to perform differently on our state metrics, and that has to be accounted for, I think. But I will come before you with more information on how schools are performing so you'll have a clearer sense. The growth is good. We want to encourage it, but we want to now turn to emphasizing more high-quality growth. Is that helpful?
Mika, thank you very much.
Thanks.
As you can see, this is a very interesting topic to the board, and we know that you'll be back with us.
Okay.
And I would say maybe as committee members, board members, we could submit some questions to you that would help formulate the presentation that you give us, just so that we get the questions answered that we need to. So thank you very much for that information, and we look forward to you continuing this with us. Is there any other business to bring before the committee? Hearing none, ask for a motion and a second to adjourn.
Kreminger, motion to adjourn.
Kreminger, motion. Lynn, second. All in favor say aye. Anyone opposed? We're adjourned.